Warning, the following ZipRecruiter radio spot you are about to hear is going to be filled with F-words.
When you're hiring, we at ZipRecruiter know you can feel frustrated, forlorn even, like your efforts are futile, and you can spend a fortune trying to find fabulous people, only to get flooded with candidates who are just fine. Fortunately, ZipRecruiter figured out how to fix all that. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. With ZipRecruiter, you can forget your frustrations because we find the right people for your roles fast, which is our absolute favorite F word. In fact, 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day.
Fantastic.
So, whether you need to hire 4, 40, or 400 people, get ready to meet first-rate talent. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/zip to try ZipRecruiter for free. Don't forget, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. Finally, that's ZipRecruiter.com/zip.
To enjoy this episode of Forensic Tales ad-free, check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Forensic Tales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
In 2008, a South Carolina man disappeared while checking his mail outside his home. His body was soon found in nearby woods, and an autopsy revealed he had been strangled to death. At first, the police had few suspects, but right before the case turned cold, investigators did something outside the box. They turned to cell phone forensics. This is Forensic Tales, episode 320, The Murder of Fred Engel. Fred and Sherry Engel met in a way that a lot of people do. They met on the internet. And before long, their relationship took them overseas. They briefly lived together in Europe, and not long after, they got married. In 2006, they moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, where Fred planned to grow his consulting business and start a new chapter. Both were in their early 50s and lived in a planned unit development called Carolina Forest. It was an upscale, quiet community where most people kept to themselves. Neighbors would later say the same exact thing over and over again. Fred and Sherry were nice, they were reserved, they were the kind of couple you waved to in passing. They were also quiet, they didn't cause problems. And by all accounts, they were very nice people. They could be anyone's neighbors. There was nothing about their life that suggested what was coming. Just before midnight on April 22nd, 2008, Sherry woke up to find Fred was gone. At first, she thought maybe he'd gone outside, but his car was still in the garage. As the minutes passed, she started to worry about him. So she went next door and knocked on her neighbor Tom's door, telling him she couldn't find her husband. Together, they searched the inside of the house and then the front yard. But there was no sign of Fred anywhere. That's when Sherry noticed something else. Fred's mailbox keys were missing. They weren't hanging where they always were. To give you a better picture, in this particular community, the mailboxes weren't located right outside the homes. They sat at the end of the neighborhood about 2 blocks away in a heavily wooded area. So that's when Sherry and Tom got into the car and drove down there. But when they got down to the mailboxes, something immediately caught their attention. There was a pair of glasses lying on the ground. And that wasn't the only thing they saw. There was also blood on the pavement. As Sherry walked closer, Tom grabbed her by the shoulder and stopped her. He told her to get back in the car. If someone had done something bad to Fred, they could still be nearby. So they immediately called the police. And when they got there, they began by searching the area around the mailboxes. But the search didn't last long. Just 10 to 15 yards inside the woods, they found a body. It was Fred. He had been strangled to death. A shoelace or bootlace was found tied around his neck. There was also a deep, bloody gash on the back of his head. Given what they saw, the police developed a theory. They believed that Fred had been attacked at his mailbox, struck from behind, knocked unconscious, and then dragged into the woods and killed. Fred was over 6 feet tall and weighed around 250 pounds, so dragging a man that size wouldn't be easy. Fred was a very, very big guy. This wasn't a teenager. This wasn't someone petite. Whoever did this was an adult. They were strong enough to overpower someone like Fred. But the motive didn't make any sense. This wasn't a robbery. Fred was still wearing his nice wedding ring. He had an expensive watch around his wrist, and even his cell phone was still in his pocket. To be frank, nothing of value had been taken. The only motive left was murder, and the evidence at the scene suggested something even more disturbing. Fred's killer hadn't stumbled across him by chance. They were waiting. They knew exactly where Fred would be and when he would arrive. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was an ambush. All of that adds up to being about something personal. When Sherry learned what had happened to her husband, first responders suddenly had another emergency on their hands. She was totally and completely hysterical. Overwhelmed by shock and grief, she collapsed right in front of the paramedics. Those on scene would later describe it as heartbreaking to witness. They saw the raw pain of someone who had just lost their husband. When Sherry finally got back on her feet, she told investigators the same thing she would repeat again and again. She even fully cooperated with police, allowing them to search their home that very night. They were looking for anything they could get their hands on. Conflicts with neighbors, business disputes, angry clients, contractors. They looked for any threats of any kind. And at first, nothing stood out. But then, police learned about a confrontation Fred had shortly before his murder. It involved a teenager who lived in the neighborhood. By every stretch of the imagination, this kid was a problem. He had set fires in the area. He was accused of shooting at cars with an air rifle. He just had a reputation for aggressive behavior. So this stood out as a red flag to detectives. This was a teen who had a temper, and he was physically large. He was basically the size of an adult man. And the weapon used to kill Fred, which was a pair of shoelaces, stood out as well. It wasn't something someone brought with them. It was a weapon of opportunity, something a person might grab in the heat of the moment. If Fred had another confrontation with this teenager, it could explain what happened. When police spoke to him, his demeanor didn't help his case. He was evasive. He was also confrontational. But eventually, he admitted he had been in the neighborhood that night, but he claimed he was at a nearby shopping center. So the police went to go verify his story. And as it turned out, he was telling the truth. Surveillance video placed him there before Fred's estimated time of death, between 11 and midnight. The timeline didn't lie, and just like that, their strongest suspect was eliminated. Whoever killed Fred Engel was still out there. As investigators dug deeper into Fred's life, another possibility came into focus: Fred's work. They learned that his consulting business had a reputation. Fred went into struggling businesses and evaluated what was working and what wasn't. And sometimes that meant people lost their jobs. To some people, Fred wasn't just a consultant, he was the hatchet man. And that meant enemies, not just around town, but across the country and even overseas. For the next several days, police worked through name after name, hoping forensic evidence would narrow things down. They also focused on the shoelaces used to kill Fred. Could DNA have been left behind? But the lace was old and dirty. It had also been exposed to the elements. So in the end, no foreign DNA was recovered, no usable profile. So that's when they had to keep digging. While they dug, fear was quickly spreading throughout town. Parents stopped letting their kids play outside past 5. Joggers disappeared from the streets. People who once felt safe in this quiet upscale community are now all staying inside. But despite public pressure, the investigation stalled. Leads dried up, weeks passed. And then a break came from a very unexpected place: Fred's funeral. Friends and family later told police they noticed something strange at the service. They said they saw Sherry talking with a man they didn't recognize during the memorial service. He was tall, he had red hair, and he wasn't familiar to anyone there. And what stood out even more was that the interaction didn't end with the funeral. In the days that followed, Sherry continued spending time with this mystery man. But no one in her life knew who he was, and no one could explain how he fit into Fred's life either. When Fred was still around, he spent a lot of time on the road. His consulting work literally took him all over the world. And when he was gone, Sherry often stayed with family in Kentucky. That's where she was from. They all loved Fred. He was very well liked and trusted, and no one ever questioned his love and devotion to Sherry. But after the murder, something about her behavior started to bother them. She was constantly seen hanging out with this man whom they had never met before, and it didn't feel innocent or casual. To those watching, the relationship seemed to be more than an innocent friendship. In fact, after Fred was killed, Sherry seemed to be spending even more time with him. So as you can imagine, rumors began to circulate. Was she having an affair? Instead of ignoring their guts, Sherry's family did something about it. They called the police, they told them everything. And right away, investigators in Kentucky began looking into this guy. And they very quickly identified him as Timmy Rogers. He was a 40-year-old contractor, recently divorced with absolutely no criminal record. But physically, he stood out like a sore thumb. Timmy was 6'4" and weighed around 240 pounds. He was nearly the same exact size as Fred. And that detail really mattered, because whoever did this had to be strong enough to overpower someone like Fred. They also had to be able to drag him into the woods and strangle him. Timmy Rogers fit that profile. Then there was his truck. At the time, Timmy drove a red pickup truck, and on the night of the murder, a neighbor reported seeing something unusual. She noticed an unfamiliar red pickup truck slowly driving near the mailbox area. She said she watched it creep toward the mailboxes and suddenly stop. She never saw the driver get out. But investigators later learned that the truck was a Chevy 310. It was the same model Timmy Rogers owned. But when police went to interview him, his truck was no longer red. It had been repainted gray. Not only was that strange, but it was also very, very suspicious. Meanwhile, detectives were also taking a closer look at Sherry. And one of the things they did was examine her cell phone. They went through it the night of Fred's murder, but at first, nothing stood out. But a few days later, analysts uncovered something unexpected. They found a series of deleted phone calls. The calls had taken place in the days leading up to Fred's murder, including the night he was killed. All of them came from a phone number with a 502 area code, Kentucky. Investigators traced the number and learned it didn't belong to a regular cell phone. It was a disposable burner phone that had been purchased by Timmy Rogers. Even more troubling was the timing. Several of the calls happened on the night of the murder and during a window when Sherry had told police she was asleep. So that could only mean one thing. Sherry hadn't told the police the truth. She was lying. Forensic analysts went deeper. They went through everything: call activities, patterns, timings, and what they uncovered suggested something far more disturbing than a single bad decision. The forensic data pointed to months of communication, coordination, planning, a conspiracy to commit murder. So Sherry was brought back in for more police questioning, but she denied any involvement. She denied knowing about a plan. She denied wanting Fred dead. She told police she loved him. But the digital evidence was telling a very different story. With so many options for weight loss treatment plans, it can be hard to know what's the best choice, who to trust, what to know about side effects, and if something's even going to work. That's why hers offers access to doctor-developed treatment plans that are personalized to you. Hers goes beyond medication by offering access to ongoing care, dosage and medication adjustments, lifestyle and nutrition tips, and 24/7 support with no hidden costs or membership fees. And with options starting at just $69 per month with a 10-month plan when paid up front in full, Hers provides access to options that fit your goals and your budget. Feel like your best self again? Visit forhers.com/tales to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's forhers.com/tales, forhers.com/tales. Weight loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded drug products are not approved or evaluated for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for full details, important safety information, and restrictions. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased. Therapy can help, but sometimes it isn't the whole answer. Talkiatry gives you access to real psychiatric care with licensed clinicians who can diagnose and prescribe medication if it's right for you. It's a simple way to get effective treatment right from home. And as a busy podcaster and mom myself, the convenience is so important. What's even better is that all their 600 plus clinicians are in network with major insurers, so you can use your existing insurance instead of paying monthly subscriptions or out-of-network fees. You'll meet with an experienced, licensed psychiatrist who takes the time to understand what's going on, builds a personalized treatment plan, and can prescribe medication when it's right for you. Your care stays consistent and evidence-based. Head to talkiatry.com/tales and complete the short assessment to get matched with an in-network psychiatrist in just a few minutes. Head to talkiatry.com/tales. You can't manage your heart health if you're missing half the info. Standard tests check the basics, but they skip over key markers that could change everything. And with it being National Heart Month, I've personally been thinking more about my heart health, especially now that I'm a mom. And what I like about Function is that it doesn't tell you what to worry about. It shows you what's actually happening in your body. Function is designed by world-class physicians and trusted by hundreds of thousands of members. You stop guessing, you stop being reactive, and you start making decisions based on real insights. If I had needed this product, it's what I'd use. Own your health and start with your heart. Function gives you access to 160 plus lab tests each year, including advanced markers for heart health, inflammation, stress, hormones, and toxins for $365 a year. That's $1 a day. Learn more and join using my link. Visit functionhealth.com/tales and use gift code TALES25 for a $25 credit toward your membership. Police really thought the calls between Sherry and Timmy could explain what happened to Fred. They just needed to prove where those calls were happening. So investigators turned to cell phone forensics. They obtained the locations of every cell tower in the area and performed a tower dump. A tower dump captures all phones that connect to a specific cell tower: incoming calls, outgoing calls, call durations, and which numbers were communicating with each other. And when analysts mapped the data, the picture became crystal clear. On the night Fred was murdered, Sherry and Timmy exchanged 5 phone calls, and 4 of those calls were made or received right next to the mailbox area where Fred was attacked. Not blocks away, not in the neighborhood. They were placed right in the middle of a crime scene. The final call came from a different location. It was placed in a hotel about 7 miles from the scene, so the police went there right away. And when they got there, the hotel staff recognized Timmy Rogers within seconds. They also confirmed something else. Timmy drove a red pickup truck. Records showed he checked out of the hotel the day after Fred's memorial service. And then came another shocker. Sherry had been paying for Timmy's hotel room with her own credit card. But even faced with all of this evidence, both Sherry and Timmy denied everything. They denied involvement in the crime. They denied any romantic relationship. They denied planning anything. And when police confronted Sherry with the cell phone data, she claimed she didn't remember. But later that day, she returned back to the police station. And this time, she told investigators something very different. She said it was time to come clean. Sherry ultimately admitted to the affair with Timmy Rogers, but she insisted she never wanted Fred dead. She said that Timmy had talked about killing Fred. He also talked about marrying her afterward, but she claimed she never believed he would actually go through with it. She said she was completely shocked when it happened, but police and prosecutors didn't see it that way. They argued the phone evidence told a very different story. It told a story that laid out the murder almost minute by minute. At 9:43 p.m., Timmy called Sherry from the mailbox area. He told her he was there and he was ready. At 10:35, Sherry called Timmy and told him the plan was delayed. Then at 11:05, she called again. This time, her message was clear. Get ready. Fred was coming. Sherry had asked Fred to go check the mailbox, knowing exactly who was waiting for him and what would happen next. Evidence shows that Fred was struck in the head with some type of blunt object. He was then dragged into the woods and strangled to death with a shoelace. At 11:42, Timmy called Sherry back to let her know it was done and that he was heading back to the hotel. Then at 12:03, he called again, this time from the hotel room. He told her he was back and was cleaning up. Now, before Sherry ever went to her neighbors or even reported Fred missing, she deleted every one of those phone calls. The forensic evidence didn't just suggest what happened that night. It documented it. 3 months after Fred's murder, a grand jury indicted Timmy Rogers for murder. And at his trial, the state theorized he had killed Fred because he was having an affair with Sherry. It's one of the oldest motives in the book. Sherry and Timmy wanted to be together, but with Fred in the picture, they had to get rid of him. And the only way to accomplish that was murder. At his trial, Sherry testified that the affair with Timmy started sometime in May of 2007. She said she met him while visiting family in Kentucky. Then after that, she used the excuse of visiting family or seeing her doctor to go back and visit him every month. Throughout that whole time, Fred had absolutely no idea about the affair. He just assumed his wife was going back home to see her family. Throughout the affair, Sherry claimed that Timmy frequently talked about, quote, getting rid of Fred. He said he felt like he was going to take her away from him. In fact, she testified that Timmy had even tried to hire one of his family members to kill Fred. She said the family member was a, quote, sharpshooter and could take him out relatively easily. But according to her, the family member refused. He wouldn't do it. Sherry tried to say that she didn't want Fred dead. She said she told Timmy she didn't want him to do it. But eventually, she got more comfortable with it. She eventually agreed to it. In October 2010, Timmy Rogers was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 35 years in prison. 2 months later, in December, Sherry Engel was sentenced to 30 years for her role in the plot that took her husband's life. She ended up pleading guilty to accessory before the fact of voluntary manslaughter. And under the law, she must serve at least 85% of her sentence before she's eligible for parole. At her sentencing, the judge said he hoped she would have to serve every day of her sentence. Prosecutors said this case wasn't solved by a confession or an eyewitness. It was solved by digital forensics, cell phone records, tower dumps, deleted calls that still left a trail. Every lie unraveled. Not because someone talked, but because the data did. Fred Engel didn't die in a robbery. He didn't die by chance. He was lured from his home to a place where someone was already waiting. And in the end, the same technology that Sherry believed she could erase became the evidence that put both conspirators behind bars. Because no matter how carefully a crime is planned, you can't outsmart the science.
Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell. If you'd like to help create compelling new cases, fund research, and assist with production and editing costs, you can support the show with a small monthly contribution. In return, you'll be one of the first to listen to new ad-free episodes and gain access to exclusive content. To learn more, visit patreon.com/Forensic Tales. Forensic Tales is a podcast made possible by our Patreon producers. If you'd like to become a producer of the show, head over to our Patreon page or send me an email at Courtney@forensictales.com. For a complete list of sources used in this episode, please visit forensictales.com. Thank you for listening and see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.
Finding great candidates to hire can be like, well, trying to find a needle in a haystack. Sure, you can post your job to some job board, but then all you can do is hope the right person comes along. Which is why you should try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them for you. Its powerful technology identifies people with the right experience and actively invites them to apply to your job. You get qualified candidates fast. So while other companies might deliver a lot of hay, ZipRecruiter finds you what you're looking for. The needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/zip. That's ZipRecruiter.com/zip. ZipRecruiter.com/zip.